Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Rahim Mehta. I'm bringing you another portrait tutorial breakdown where I'm going to show you how we're going to go from the left image to the right one. As you can see, the left one looks a bit more flat, a little bit more boring, and the right one looks more punchy and contrasty. So before we begin, I just want to give a quick disclaimer that this is a tutorial breakdown which kind of assumes that you have some understanding of masks and selection, and I prefer doing these layer breakdowns so that I can tell you why I did a particular thing, because it's more easy for you guys to follow, because your photo is definitely not going to be the same. So I think it's more vital that you understand the fundamental concept rather than just try to imitate what I've done. So without wasting any more of your time, let's just jump right into it. So I usually start my portraits by retouching skin, and Sarah has very good skin to begin with, so I did not have to do a lot of work. I corrected her skin using local dodge and burn. This is after and this is before. Now I'm not going to go deep into this concept as it is quite intricate, but basically what you do is you are basically just creating a curves adjustment layer, bumping up the midtones a bit. You take your brush, you bring your flow all the way down to 1%, and then you hand paint on all these dark areas. Can you see all these dark areas that I hand painted? And you're keeping your flow at 1%, so you can basically control the intensity of how bright you want to do. It comes a lot with practice, but it is a very realistic way to retouch skin. I did the same to darken some areas. As you can see, there's this area that looked a bit too bright, and I just darkened it and a bit here and stuff. So as it is, it's already looking pretty good. Now I wanted to retouch this part of her skin which needed a bit more color. So for this, I just used basically clone stamping and the spot healing tool, and this is what I got. So this is your before and this is your after. Now the next thing I did was, we'll come to the global dodge and global burn later on. It's again done on the face, but I usually do it at the end of the image. The next thing I did was I brought some details in her eyes. I have a tutorial on eye retouching. This was a bit different because she did not have an obvious catch light. Instead, the sky is her catch light. And if I zoom in, you can probably see me in her iris, which is pretty cool thanks to the 42 megapixels on my Sony camera. So the next thing we did was I desaturated the background a bit, and the reason I did that is basic rules of photography. You want to bring the focus on the subject, and that's where you want to bring all the contrast and color to. You can obviously break these rules depending on your shot, but basically I wanted to go for a green and red color palette, and I wanted to desaturate this a bit and add a slight red to it. So I did this using hue saturation, and this is what I got. Now the next thing I wanted to do was add some colors to it. Now if you look at my leaves, you can see that there are two colors in the leaves itself. You can see this yellowish green look, and then you have the cyan and teal look. And once you start playing around with the hue saturation tool, you'll realize that these values change differently. And so I basically turned the cyan's sort of color into a more red color, which I absolutely loved. The next thing I did was I wanted to mute the greens. They were a bit too strong, again taking focus from my subject, so I brought them down. I would add contrast and color to them later, but I usually like to start off with flatter image. So that's what I did there. The next thing I did was I wanted to add a bit of color contrast. Her shirt was also kind of grayish green in color and kind of blending in with everything. So what I did was I just hand painted it with a solid adjustment and just turned the blend mode to soft light. Different blend modes will give you a different look, whether you want to go for color, overlay, soft light. I prefer doing it this way, so this is a particular color I took. This was again tiny reducing of vibrant colors. It's not that noticeable to you, but that's what I did. Now the next thing I did was add contrast to the shot, which was a big thing that I did for this particular photo, and this is what I did. If I open my curve just to show you, I have a detailed video on tone curves, but basically what I'm doing is, since most of my photo is in midtones and shadows, I just darken them a bit, and I just bumped up the highlights a bit, which is mostly this area and a bit of her face. So this is how it looked before and this after. The next thing I did was I changed this white into a more red color. The reason I have a group for this is I had it green also and I couldn't decide, so I had both the layers and this to see whichever one I pick later. The next thing I did was I selected her lips and I basically added lipstick to her lips. You basically just create a solid color. Again, blend modes. You can try soft light also. For me, overlay worked really well and I really like this color. You can choose whatever you want and it's super easy to do. Now the next thing I did was I added a bit of saturation to this part of the image. Remember I told you I like to work with a flattened image, so I just added a bit of saturation to the reds and greens, not too crazy. And as you can see, I did not do it on her face and hair as I already have a lot of color and contrast over there. Then I added more contrast over here, and as you can see, that made a huge difference. Again, I masked out her face and hair because I did not want it to affect there, and I just created a typical S-curve, darkening my shadows and popping my highlights, or rather midtones, for just this part. So this was before, this is after. The next thing I did was I created a color balance adjustment layer, added a bit of warmth in the midtones, and this is what I got. This is before, this is after, just to give it like a nice, happy, vibrant, warm look. This was again just bumping up a bit of the reds that I had removed earlier. I could obviously go back to that same layer and just bump them up, but this is basically when you're editing a shot like this, you're going back and forth. So I just recreated another layer to do the same, nothing too major over here. And just to give it the final touch, I added a bit more warmth over here using the tone curves. Now the reason I did the tone curves now and not the color balance is basically tone curves does things in a more relative manner. As you can see, it works on channels and curves that take your highlights and your shadows into account. So sometimes this is the better way of doing it. You can watch my tutorial on tone curves to get a better understanding of why you would use this over other tools. But yeah, just to add a bit of warmth, I brought that blue channel down, which gives it that warm look. Now remember the dodge and bird layers I left earlier. I usually do them at the end or sometimes in the beginning. It's completely up to you. I usually like to do it at the end, so I already have my contrasts in to kind of give me an idea how much do I want to go with it. So again, the dodging is basically done in the same way you were skin retouching. You bump up the curves. This time you don't have to go with 1% brushing. You can go with like 9-10. It's completely up to you. By practice it becomes a lot more easier, but this is my dodge layer. So I've just added highlights on wherever her skin would have highlights, her lips, her nose, this part of the eye, a bit on her eyebrow, and added some burn, which is basically just adding more shadows to give it more depth. And that's about it. This is how my shot looked before, and this is after. At the end of the day, all you have to remember, a good portrait is all about creating contrast, whether it's exposure contrast or color contrast. Understand your color. Don't simply put the entire adjustment layer on the entire image. Sometimes you have to mask out areas. If you think her hair is already too contrasty, don't add contrast over it. If you already think there's a lot of shadow, don't add more shadows to it. So you kind of have to mask out areas and see what works best for you. And that's about it. If you like my video, please let me know in the comment section below. Like this video, subscribe to my channel. I hope you guys are being safe, and I shall see you guys next time. Take care.